Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet spring night where the air smells faintly of lilacs and fresh cut grass, and the world seems to slow down just enough to let you catch your breath. I was in the kitchen, apron on, humming softly to a song from the radio, stirring a pot of my husband's favorite stew. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just a typical dinner night at home in our cozy, slightly weathered house in the suburbs. My husband, Michael, was in the living room watching the game, his voicey occasionally rising in frustration or delight, depending on how the team was doing. It had been one of those comfortable days between us, the kind you don't think to remember, but somehow miss when they're gone. Then the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on the apron and glanced at Michael. Were you expecting someone? He frowned, muting. TV, no, I wasn't. I walked to the front door, curious, and opened it to find a tall man in his early 60s standing there with a sheepish smile. He wore a faded leather jacket and held a bottle of red wine in one hand, an Asmol duffel bag in the other. His hair had gone mostly gray, but there was something youthful in his expression, mischievous almost. "Hey, Mike," he said with a warm grin. "Long time." Michael's face lit up with recognition as he walked over. "No way, Doug." Doug Stanton, the one and in Lee. He chuckled, stepping in for UG Dot. Doug was Michael's old college friend, his best man at our wedding. Actually, I hadn't seen him in more than 20 years. Last I'd heard, he'd moved to Oregon, started a business, got divorced, and then sort of vanished from our lives. Michael clapped him on the back, already full of that old camaraderie. "What are you doing here, man?" Doug shrugged, smiling. "I was in the area, figured I'd stop by. I know it's sudden. I hope it's not too much of an imposition." "Not at all," I said, offering a welcoming smile. "You're just in time for dinner. I made too much anyway." Doug stepped inside, taking in the house like it was a memory he had in decades. There was a subtle heaviness to him, though, beneath. The humor and charm, something tired lingered in his eyes. I didn't ask, not yet. We ate around the old oak dining table, the three of us talking and lawing like no time had passed. Doug told wild stories from their college days. Some I'd heard before, some I hadn't, and we all sipped wine like we're back in our 30s again. But I noticed something different. Doug watched me more than I expected. Not in a way that was inappropriate, but there was a softness to it, a curiosity. At first, I chalked it up to nostalgia. I had always gotten along well with him, even back then. But something in his gaze lingered, made me feel seen. Like he wasn't just remembering the woman I had been, but noticing who I was now. Later, after dinner, Michael excused himself to take a long phone call from one of his brothers. Doug and I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. I poured us each a second glass of wine. "Yuck, no," Doc said, swirling his glass gently. "You haven't changed much." I lied softly. "You need your eye checked?" "The mirror tells me otherwise, Evering. I don't mean your face, has it? I mean your presence. You still have that light in you." His voice husky, sincere. I didn't quite know how to respond. I felt heat rise in my chest, not from wine, but from the way he said it. Honest, unfiltered, almost vulnerable. "I'm glad you came by," I said finally. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, too long." There was a pause, the kind that usually feels awkward, but with Doug, it just felt full. Like something unspoken hung in the air between us, waiting. "I needed this," he said after a moment. "Honestly, I didn't just happen to be in the area. I planned this. I've been lost lately, and I thought maybe coming back to something familiar would help." I looked at him closely then. The awareness in his eyes wasn't just from travel. It was life, the kind of wear and tear that settles into your soul when you've weathered more than your fair share of storms. "You're always welcome here, Doug," I said gently. He looked at me, his eyes softening even more. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Michael came back into the room then, and the moment passed. But something had shifted, I felt it. A subtle current beneath the surface of everything, and I had no idea where it was going to lead. But I knew this, that night something had started. Not an affair, not a betrayal, but something deeply human. A reconnection. A mirror held up to parts of myself I hadn't seen in years. And as I went to bed that night, lying beside my husband, who was already asleep, I found myself thinking about Doug's eyes and wondering what exactly it was that he saw in me. The next morning was quiet. Michael had left Cheerly to help his cousin with a roofing job, leaving Doug and me alone in the house. I hadn't planned it that way. Honestly, I didn't even think about it when Michael mentioned it the night before. But when I walked into the kitchen and saw Doug sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, wearing the some wrinkled shirt from yesterday, it caught me off guard. "Morning," he said, looking up with a soft smile. "Morning," I replied, pulling my robe tighter. "Sleep okay?" He nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." "Your couch is surprisingly comfort," I laughed lightly. "That couch has magical powers, Dot. It's rescued more than a few people in need of rest." There was a beat of silence between us as I poured myself some coffee. I was suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. No TV, no Michael, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the clink of ceramic mugs. Doug glanced out the window. "Still as peaceful here he is, I remember. It's like nothing changed and everything has." I took a sip. "That's how life feels in your 50s, familiar and strange all at once." He looked at me then, that same quiet intensity in his gaze. "You ever think about how we got here? The turns we took or didn't?" I leaned against the counter, sometimes, but not too much. That road can get a little heavy. Dew nodded slowly, like he understood too well. We ended up going for a walk after breakfast. I needed to run to the market, and Dove offered to come along. The sun was bright but gentle, filtering through the trees with that late morning warmth that hints at summer. We took the longer path through the park, past Step End and the old oak trees. It was peaceful, too peaceful for small talk. "I almost called you once," Doug said as we reached a bench and sat down years ago, right after my divorce. I eventually the number, but I hung up. "Why didn't you call?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "I guess I didn't know what I was looking for, and I didn't want to make things complicated." I turned to look at him. "Doug, I'm not someone you have to protect from your mess. We all have our own." He chuckled softly. "I know. It's just you were always this light for me. Even when we were younger, you had this warmth, this kindness. It made me feel like I could be a better version of myself." His voice cracked a little as hesitant, and it caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort him, the way you would an old friend going through a raw time, but another part of me, one I hadn't felt in years, wanted to lean into the connection I felt building between us. I reached out and touched his hand just for a second. It was instinct, not intention. But he looked at me like that small gesture meant everything. "Doug," I said gently, "you didn't have to carry all this alone." He held my gaze for a moment. "Neither do you." That stayed with me. We walked back in silence, our hands brushing once or twice, though neither of us spoke about it. Back at the house, I made lunch, and we pretended things were as they always were. Laughing, sharing stories, avoiding the weight off the morning. When Michael returned later that afternoon, Doug slipped seamlessly back into old buddy mode. He was loud, funny, cracking jokes about the football team and ribbing Michael about his thinning hair. It was easy again on the surface, But beneath that surface, something had shifted. That night, after Doug had Ganado bed, back on the couch with an extra pillow, I left for him. I stood at the sink washing the last of the dishes. Michael had already turned in, exhausted from the day. The window above the sink was cracked open, letting in the cool night air. I felt the breeze on my skin and closed my eyes for a moment, and all I could think about was the way Doug had looked at me, not as someone he used to talk, no, but as someone he still wanted to understand. It wasn't love, not yet. It wasn't even romance, but it was something real, stirring, unexpected, and it made me wonder what else I'd forgotten to feel over the years. The next day felt heavier, like if air in the house had thickened with all the things left unsaid. Doug stayed for breakfast again. He was overstay. I leaned against the counter, studying him for a long moment. Are you leaving because you want to, or because you are afraid of staying? That stopped him. He met my gaze, and for a moment, everything was baked, raw, honest, and exposed. I don't want to cause trouble, he said finally. You haven't, I said. Not yet, he laughed softly. That yet says everything. I should have walked away. I should have changed the subject. Let it go. But something in me, something I hadn't listened to in years, kept pushing. You're not the only one who feels confused, I said quietly. I don't know what this is or what it means, but I feel it too. He stepped closer slowly, like he was waiting for him to tell him to stop. I keep thinking about how different life could have been, he said, voice low. If things had gone another way, if I'd said something years ago, and what would you have said? I asked. He paused, then whispered that I always felt something for you, even when I shouldn't have. The words sank deep, like a pebble dropped in a still pond. The room felt impossibly quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock each second, thudding like a heartbeat. Then her reached out. His hand brushed mine. It was just a touch, nothing more. But two didn't pull away. I let it happen. I let it sit there between us like a question we were too afraid to ask out loud. I don't want to hurt Michael, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Neither do I, he replied. We stood like that for a moment, caught between right and wrong, past and present, memory and desire. But we didn't go further. Wouldn't cross the line. Instead, Doug stepped back. You're a good woman, he said, voice tight. Better than I deserve to be near right now. He grabbed his coat, slinging it over his shoulder. I'll pack up, hesed, eyes not quite meeting mine. I'll gone before Michael gets home. I didn't stop. I just stood there, heart pounding, eye stinging, wondering how something could feel so full and so empty all at once. Not an hour later, the front door closed gently behind him. And just like that, Doug was gone. Michael came home later, whistling as he set his golf bag down by the door. Did Doug head out? I nodded, keeping my back turned as I stirred the stew. Yeah, said he had to hit the road. He left a note. Michael walked over and kissed my temple, his arm looping around me waist. He's a good guy, always was. I forced a smile and leaned into him. Yeah, I said quietly. He realized. But in the quiet that followed, I felt something deep inside me shift. Not guilt, no true grit, just the sudden powerful realization that I had forgotten parts of myself, forgotten how it felt to be seen, to be understood, to feel something stir inside that wasn't routine or obligation, but connection. And I didn't know what to do with that. Not yet. Weeks passed. Tub didn't call. He didn't write. And I didn't reach out either. Life returned to its rhythm. Quiet breakfasts, evening news with Michael, phone calls with the kids, folding laundry, watering. The plants, the kind of ordinary that can feel comforting on the outside, but strangely hollow if you're listening too closely to your own thoughts. But something had changed, not in my marriage. Michael was still the same, good, steady kind. Amen, who'd given me decades of partnership, built a life with me from scratch, survived our hardest years with grace. I loved him. That had never been in question. That loving someone and feeling to live with them weren't always the same thing. It's a truth I hadn't let myself admit until Doug walked back into our lives for that short visit. He didn't seduce me. He didn't try to. All he did was see me, really see me, and remind me of a version of myself I'd let slip away without even noticing. And that stayed with me. One evening, about a month after Doug left, I was sitting on the back porch alone, wrapped in a sweater, sipping tea. The garden was quiet, the moon casting soft shadows across the grass. Michael was inside watching a documentary. The windows glowed behind me, casting long rectangles of warm yellow light. I found myself thinking about the moment in the kitchen, the quiet tension, the electricity in the air, the way Doug had said my name like it meant something. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about recognition. That moment held up a mirror I hadn't known I needed. And in that reflection, I saw a woman who still had the capacity for longing, for wonder, for being stirred. I didn't feel shame for that. I felt human. Later that night, as I slipped into bed beside Michael, I looked at him. He was already drifting to sleep, his face softened by time and familiarity. "Hey," I whispered. He stirred. "I've been thinking," I said. "I want us to go somewhere, just the two of us. Maybe the coast or up to the mountains." He blinked his eyes open a little. "Really?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think we need something different," Air said. He reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm and familiar. "I'd like that," he said. "We didn't talk about Doug. I never told Michael how close we came to crossing a line, and maybe I never will, because that moment wasn't about infinity. It was about rediscovery, and that rediscovery led me back to myself and back to this marriage in a way I hadn't expected. The next morning, I found the small note Doug had left behind. I hadn't read it when he left. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid of what it might say. It was still sitting in the side drawer of the whole table, tucked between an old stack of receipts and a spare key. It read, "Thank you for reminding me of who used to be and who I still might become. Take care of your beautiful life, Doug." I held the note for a long time, my fingers tracing pages. Then, without fully knowing why, I smiled. Because I had found something in those few days. Not a man, not Airman's, but a part of myself I had neglected for far too long. And in finding it, I was able to return home to my own life with softer eyes, a fuller heart. Maybe we'll only get a few of those moments in a lifetime. The ones that wake us up, that shift the way we see the world. The ones that arrive quietly in the shape of an old friend at your doorstep and leave behind more than they take. Doug had been one of those moments for me, and the rest was mine to carry forward.